president's kids more important than yours? Then why is he skeptical about putting armed security in our schools when his kids are protected by armed guards at their school? Mr. Obama demands the wealthy pay their fair share of taxes, but he's just another elitist hypocrite when it comes to a fair share of security.
Joining me now is Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today, and Ron Fournier, National Correspondent and Editorial Director for the National Journal. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So the president's children, doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, are generally considered off limits. Ron, what do you make of this NRA ad?
They really blew it. I mean, this is an organization that has a lot of power and a lot of credibility and has a legitimate purpose in our society to protect the Second Amendment. But why would you put out an ad like that that is just demonstrably false? The president is not opposed to security in the schools. He does not. In fact, we have a lot of schools in this country that already have security. He just doesn't think that arming guards in schools is the only answer to cracking down on school shooting. And it's just a cringe-worthy, exploitive ad that undermines the NRA, undermines the cause, and frankly, if you're a Second Amendment supporter, if you're a gun advocate, I would think that you feel ill-served by your organization this morning.
Well, they're taking a lot of heat over it, and just about 10 minutes ago, Susan, we got a statement from the NRA defending this ad. It says in part, whoever thinks the ad is about President Obama's daughters are missing the point completely, or they're trying to change the subject. This ad is about keeping our children safe. It goes on to say later, this is the real issue. Anything else is an attempted, calculated distraction. Susan, how is this likely to play into the debate?
I think this is a very risky move by the NRA. They've taken a pretty hard line, at that news conference with Wayne LaPierre and in their comments since. And, Ron's covered a lot of campaigns, as have I. I think this may be the toughest, I'm not quite sure what the right word is, edgiest ad I've seen by a mainstream advocacy group or political campaign in my memory, because we do think of the kids of the president as being largely off limits. The Obamas don't put them forward in this debate, and I think that probably makes a lot of Americans uncomfortable. If they wanted attention, well, they succeeded in that.
Well, meantime, the president is going to announce several proposals for Congress to consider, among them universal background checks on gun buyers anywhere, including trade shows, harsher penalties for gun sellers who don't do those checks, a ban on high-capacity ammunition magazines, and that renewed assault weapons ban. I'm wondering, Ron, is this a liberal base wish list, or is the president going to fight this the way he did health care, try to make it sort of a defining moment for his second term?
It's definitely a liberal wish list, and my guess is he's going to fight for this. This is one of those defining issues that he could make a big difference on. It's going to be tough, though. The public is largely in favor of the background check, largely in favor of banning the high quantity ammunition jackets. They're pretty much split on assault weapon ban, although Newtown kind of moved that number just to the north of 50% in most polls. So it's going to be tough. It'll be interesting to see what some of the red state Democrats like David Pryor in Arkansas or Begich in Alaska, how they come down on this. My guess is it's going to be awfully hard to get much of this through this very polarized Congress.
Yeah, and the question is, what methods will the president use? On Morning Joe today, senior Obama campaign advisor Robert Gibbs suggested that getting meaningful legislation passed is going to be a long slog, but that the White House has talked about getting his election apparatus involved in this fight. Let's listen.
The president has the most exciting campaign apparatus ever built. Mm-hmm. It's time to turn that loose. Right. It's time to turn that loose for something more than just an election, right? If the NRA's got a list, then Obama for America has a bigger list. And it is time to get activated again.
So, Susan, he's surrounding himself with kids today. Newtown families are going to be here. Very powerful image. He still has the inaugural address, the State of the Union. How much is the White House going to depend on public pressure swaying Congress to get some of this passed?
Well, I think that the president will do some things by executive action that would maybe not go as far as some gun control advocates like, but I am not convinced that this will be the health care initiative of his second term. I think immigration is more likely, a comprehensive immigration overhaul is more likely to be the thing that the administration, the president puts as his first priority of his second term, and something that is probably more doable than assault weapons ban. You know, we know that on universal background checks in particular, there is really broad public support. 85% in the Pew Research Center poll that came out this week, including 85% of gun owners supported universal background checks. But on some of these other things, you know, the politics of the Republican Party, the politics of House Republicans in particular, I think makes some of these gun proposals a really tough fight to get through Congress.
Governor Cuomo in New York signed sweeping legislation yesterday that's being called the strictest on gun control in the nation. And here's what he said after signing it.
Let's at least learn from what's happened. Let's at least be able to say to people, yes, we went through terrible situations, but we saw, we learned, we responded, and we acted, and we're doing something about it. We are not victims.
No one, not even a prominent gun control advocate, Carolyn McCarthy, thinks a broad assault weapons ban is going to happen here, Ron. But there is some hope. People are talking about those high-capacity clips, mental health reform, universal background checks. Realistically, how much of this is likely to get done?
I agree with Susan. It's not as likely having a broad package as she suggests, immigration. But I'd like to go back to what Robert Gibbs said about turning loose the Barack Obama mailing list. That's a pretty significant threat. That's one thing we didn't see in the first term, was the president mobilizing his election apparatus behind his agenda. He certainly didn't do that with health care reform, which I think is one reason why it still is relatively unpopular. The fact that they're throwing down the gauntlet and saying we're going to throw our list up against NRA's list and let's see what happens, I think that's a pretty significant development. It'd be fascinating to see if it is able to sway any votes in the House and the Senate, especially among those conservative Democrats.
Ron, Susan, hang on. It's not just some states, and we just saw what happened in New York, that are trying to take action on gun control while the federal government decides what's going to happen here. Weston, which is just about 20 miles from Newtown, drafted a proposal in their town that includes banning automatic assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. It would require safe and secure storage of weapons when they're not being used, and also the registration of all firearms